Okay, so welcome to the roundup from this year's NEPCON China here in Shanghai. I'm delighted to be joined by Mike Skinner, who's the editor of US Tech. Great to see you, Mike.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So here we are again, one more Asian show, but it's interesting to see there's quite a buzz actually around the show. A lot of people are actually saying to me that it's busy. They're doing good business here this week, so it's nice to see China actually resurging again.
I agree. Yeah, this show last year, the same thing. It was packed. The traffic is here. I think there's a few or less exhibitors here, but the atmosphere is it's dynamic here. And I know over the last 2 years, the last 3 years, there were a couple of years where growth was a little flat, but last year was a boom year. All of a sudden, nobody was expecting it, and we're seeing things like from all the traffic to where all these companies are talking about how their lead times are expanding by months. They're saying they can't even get simple mechanical parts now that they had easy access to before.
That was a big problem back at Productronica, was lead times. I mean, I had some companies saying 6 months, which is really not acceptable.
Yeah.
One of the key features I've noticed around the floor here is automation. Automation is very much on the increase, but it seems to be fairly rudimentary automation. Most of these things are single or double axle robots that they're using. They're not sort of multifaceted with the bells and whistles yet.
Yeah, I agree. I think some of the biggest companies here, like the ASM and the Fuji and the Panasonic, they even have brought their machines here are a little bit lower level ones to meet more. They're so cost conscious here in China. They're not quite ready for all the options they don't quite need.
But then, of course, when it comes to the hand soldering task, there's a big race on globally to try and automate that and roboticize that. You're seeing Metcal coming in with robotic soldering systems. You're seeing Quick, of course, a big Chinese company coming in with robotic soldering systems, which is, of course, sold by Promation in the US, and others. We saw one from Thermaltronics. I think you saw it too. It's a 5 or 6 axis robot. So it's interesting to see how that end of the industry is changing.
It is, and I think too, it's fun to see. We were talking earlier, and you mentioned that change is not, it doesn't happen overnight, and especially in this industry, which is ironic because it's the high-tech industry, but everything is just incremental. And even the Thermaltronics robot he's talking about, we're differentiating ourselves just by making the robot have 2 arms to more mimic a human, rather than it's not walking around the shop floor. It's just still the same base, but now it's got 2 arms.
It's funny. I mean, at the process end of the business and the manufacturing of the product end of the business, the technology is really taking a leap, and some of it's starting to lead from China, but it doesn't seem to be happening at the equipment level really here. So that was one of my observations. A lot of the stuff that I saw on the floor really was just things that we saw introduced at Productronica or Apex, and making a debut here in Asia for the first time.
Yeah, especially with all the Western companies, and there are a lot of them here. The high-profile companies, they introduce all their things at Productronica months ago, and they come here and they just push assembly equipment.
No, so I think that pretty much wraps it up. But I mean, of course, the show is supported by a fairly decent conference with SMTA East China. So I think we should mention that. And one of the companies I saw, BTU, actually cleaned up at the EM Asia Awards last night. I don't know if you saw that, but they actually won 3 awards, which is quite huge. So that was interesting. So I think that's about it. Is there anything else that you saw on the show floor?
I think one thing that we'll see going forward is, like with incremental progress right now, at least in the China market, the machines are king. But we're seeing, like the ASM and Hanwha, and over with Viscom, they're starting to talk about the deep learning and artificial intelligence, and the way that even like the component counting machines are using very sophisticated algorithms to add a lot of value to a machine that hasn't changed a lot, but with software, they're adding just an enormous amount of capability to these machines. And I think that's what we'll just see more of that.
Well, I mean, a couple of people touched on the topic of artificial intelligence this week, but it's actually part of a much bigger debate that's going on in the industry at the moment. I mean, because of the sheer volume of data that everybody's having to deal with, we're really getting pushed into AI before we're ready for it, because it's really in its nascent stages, and it's really not ready for mainstream manufacturing yet. But we seem to somehow be getting pushed into it.
I agree. Yeah, and we'll see as block builds on block as we start at the line stage with the Hermes standard of just machine-to-machine communication. And then as that goes to whether you use CFX or whatever to integrate with your MES system. I think it's bubbles of intelligence that will expand and expand until we have a holistic solution. But until then, we can call it artificial intelligence.
It is a form of artificial intelligence. Talking about the Hermes standard there, I mean, I did some work with them earlier in the week, and I was amazed to see how fast it's growing. I mean, it's literally just over a year old. It started a year last March with 16 members. Yeah. By Productronica, it had 28, and by this week, it had over 40. I mean, it's just incredible.
It is. It's amazing to see. And it's just because it just takes one company to take an initiative and say, like, SMEMA doesn't cover all the bases anymore. We can do something better. Yeah. And they have. And by digitizing and using these sensors to track the board, you have the information from up and down the line whenever you want at any time. You don't have to send engineers down to be checking anything. It's so easy.
Absolutely, it really simplifies the process, and it's given everybody a level playing field, because the big problem was that a lot of these companies, especially the inspection companies, were spending way too much time having to write programming data and patches every time they made a sale, because every sale was different. Now we've got a level playing field that's made it a lot easier for everybody.
Yeah, I think too, another thing about the Hermes standard I thought was really interesting is that it sends the data packets ahead of the board. So you have the information about the board that's to come in all the machines, and they'll automatically adjust the width and the height and the clearance. I thought that's fascinating to me.
No, it really is, and it's going in leaps and bounds. We're on to version 1.01 now, so it's already past the 1.0 level. So interested to see how that's going to develop.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think that about wraps it up for today. Mike, thanks again for joining us. Next show is going to be, I think for both of us, is going to be Nuremberg. I don't know if you're going to be there, but that's going to be, I guess, next month.
Next month, yeah. So if I'm there, I'll see you there.
Okay. Thanks again. Okay, bye-bye.